Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the semifinal round of this year's DIPO Open. My name is Rakian from UGM. I will be the chair. Judging alongside with me are Valencia from Unpar and also Nadia Kristabella from Ubaya. So without further ado, let's call upon the Prime Minister. Time is yours. Also, don't forget to state your preferred method of POI.
All right. Hi, am I audible?
Audible.
Okay. Gender pronouns he or they, or you can refer me as my speaking position as PM. POI, please unmute yourself. I will not be reading the chat. If by at any point I'm lagging in my speech, just please interrupt me in my speech. I'll try to take one POI from closing or opening. We think space tourism looks like the production and commercialization of rockets for the entertainment of the billionaires, of the multi-rich, right? And this is for the tertiary needs, and it's costly because it targets the billionaires who have billions of money, because the cost for each ticket is like around $100,000, for instance. And this is an require natural resources and require the brightest minds of the world. And the end game is to get as many money as possible for these capitalistic companies. There are 2 points of map models under OG. Number one, within that environmentalist means that believes that humans' life has to walk hand in hand with nature, and that is why they care about natural resources and to utilize it as effective as possible, and they minimize the degradation of natural resources as well. They also care about the most vulnerable people impacted, like the farmer, like the fisherman, like the people living every day in New York City, for instance, right? And second model is that we believe that active advocate means that you do protest government, you do protest to the companies like Tesla and SpaceX. You also do protest to individuals, especially billionaires, that use the space tourism. We also do it in social media as well, right? And we think that we highlight the cost of this space tourism, like it costs around like 100 tons of carbon emission. It also costs around 100,000 brightest scientists in the world, for instance. It also costs billions of dollars and a lot of degradation towards the natural resources. And also, we also highlight the benefit that can be allocated to better impact. Like for instance, from that money, it can be used to save houses, or from the research could be utilized to research about natural resources, and the money and the carbon can also be used for other things as well, right? And like scientists have to quit their jobs to move to SpaceX to just build the rockets for Elon, for instance, right? We also emphasize the harm and highlight even developed countries also suffer from the natural degradation. Like New York is flooding, like canals in Europe is overflowing. There's heavy drought in US, it's burning everywhere, right? So things in my speech. Firstly, why it backlashes our interest as environmentalists, and secondly, why this would reduce the space tourism on the outside the house. First, why it would backlash our interest. I have 3 points of likelihood. Number one, because we believe that the space tourism companies especially actively harms the individuals on the ground. For instance, from them building the rockets, and they also emit lots of carbon emissions. They also utilize lots of coal, a lot of like the fuel for the rocket itself is from like the mining in itself, and the mining is very big. It takes like thousands of acres, thousands of hectares. They have to remove the indigenous people. They have to cut down trees to build the mines and everything to get the fuel. And because it's the space tourism is trending, so they have to expand the mine again and again. But secondly, there's also opportunity cost. Even if like they try to like use natural friendly machines and whatnot, but the thing that they have like lots of natural resources which can be used for more important things, like for the betterment of society. Like for instance, they could build EV, for instance, later. They could build EV, or they could build houses and whatnot. I think that's an opportunity cost that's missing under the house, especially regarding human resources, because they're going to take away thousands or hundreds of thousands scientists, because it's a trend. Of course, like scientists would like try to get into the Tesla or try to get into SpaceX, and therefore they would shift the scientists from doing the research about environment, from doing research about biology and whatnot, into moving to that SpaceX to begin with. But lastly, these companies also actively shift the state support and budget. For instance, like the state now thinks that, oh, space tourism is trending, so I have to give support to SpaceX, I have to give support to companies instead of funding the betterment of society, like for instance giving public welfare or giving environment, because that's just how it works. Because of course they have to choose which companies they have to fund, which companies they have to invest, and now we have to choose to invest in SpaceX instead of investing in companies that are more environment friendly, for instance. The harm is three things. Firstly, regarding net utility, because we think that the entertainment of 10 individuals, of 10 billionaires, would cost like millions of people dying in like Africa or Indonesia or like in US in itself, right? We believe that these individuals are constantly harmed every day. They cannot get even their basic rights just for the individuals, for the billionaires to like sit down for like 10 hours in the States, for instance. But secondly, there's also very elitist, because why? Because on their side of the house, the economic power that they have is used even more to oppress these individuals, because now they realize that the economic power that these billionaires have are able to be utilized by the companies to get the more profit to begin with, and that's why it's bad. But lastly, they also prevent any efforts of saving resources. The possibility of researchers, the possibility of movements under the house is much worse, because again, they're trying to shift the state support, and they're also trying to shift the scientists. How should we weigh this? Three things. Firstly, we think that we already explained that this backlashes the interest of environmentalists itself. Secondly, we think that we represent the most vulnerable community. We represent people who are harmed by carbon emission. We represent millions of people having to die from the flood in New York and drought in the US, for instance. But lastly, we defend those who cannot defend themselves, because these people are not necessarily speak up, because for instance, like they died already, or for instance, like they're in the indigenous community where they are not able to speak up. We as environmentalists have the moral responsibility to speak. I'll take one from closing.
The problem with setting too big of an urgency is that you cannot ensure that your side solves the urgency.
Yes.
What you need to prove in Gov is how, because of all these problems, a powerless social movement is able to have the ability to change all that.
Okay, cool. Which moves me to my second argument about why this would reduce space tourism. 4 points of likelihood. Firstly, let's talk about Parliament. We think there are 3 momentums, right? Firstly, there's a climate crisis going on in the US. Like there's, for instance, like drought in New York, or like every California is burning. There's also flooding. There's also like lots of typhoons, a lot of like natural disasters that are happening. This means that this increases the urgency of individuals, especially as we highlight the cost and why it's correlated to space tourism. This would shift the support against the parliament. Second, this US election coming in 2024, there's also going to be candidates, be it in like legislative or in presidential candidates, that are going to cater to our needs, especially that because there are lots of people like understanding the impact of the space industry, right? But thirdly, there's also growing awareness from individuals regarding this. So what this translates, they're going to be a constituent for the election later on, which means that Parliament has the interest to cater to these needs and make sure that they will try to make policies to limit the space tourism. But secondly, it's also a common enemy that our people hate Elon Musk, for instance, right? But thirdly, there's at very least, if we cannot compete against the big companies, we can create accountability towards the individuals, towards the billionaires, because we can cancel the billionaires, we can cancel people who actually use this thing. And of course, like they would, some people, it would reduce the demand from the market of space tourism, because of course they would then try to, it's useless for them because they would get canceled every day. And especially if they have like companies, if they have like stocks and everything, it's bad for them. But lastly, at the very least, we can also create less scientists to work for that company, because those scientists don't want to have bad reputation on their CV or bad reputation, because now like when they choose to work in SpaceX, now people will try to like do not want to hire them, and people don't want to actually people will try to cancel them, for instance, right? The benefit is 2 things. One, even if like we can create macro policies like to cater to space tourism, but secondly, we can reduce the demand and also reduce the supply from the scientists in itself. All these reasons we try to open the government.
Thank you for that speech. Now I call upon the leader of opposition. Time is yours.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible and visible.
All right, wait, let me just. All right. Bisa aja nih. Ini siapa ya, Chef Kirby? Batara ya? Oke. Hai, Cia. Setting up my timer. Stopwatch. Right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Texas froze last year. New York is flooding crazily where middle-class people's houses are literally submerged underwater. California is burning. There is a unique and unprecedented momentum here that only OG brought, where middle to upper class in first world countries like America are directly impacted by the harms of climate change. This is where we stab necessarily people who are in power, because environmentalists have all of the momentum to galvanize and create a strong campaign to necessarily take down those who have always tried to dismiss us for so long. One argument that I'm going to bring that directly clashes with whatever OO brought, in which I'm going to talk to you the likelihood of why only when we actively advocate against space tourism can we create a powerful campaign that can change minds and side with the environmentalists. Let's set the context here. Environmentalists have always struggled in creating impactful campaign because the public is increasingly desensitized to the issue due to the slow burn of it, in which that people are already know that we are getting hotter and hotter, that everything is fucking up, for example. But this is, people think it's old news. But this can only change when we actively advocate against space tourism. Why? 3 lessons in marketing. 1, no virality due to there is no fresh news. The strategy that we've always had is to highlight orangutan starving in the middle of Borneo away from people's daily lives, or fishermen in third world countries like Philippines who are losing their boats because the water level is rising. They never talked about the everyday middle class or the impact to individuals specifically on their neighborhoods in Pantai Indah Kapuk or whatever. Greenpeace is the most out-of-touch NGO with the worst marketing campaign because they don't necessarily talk to people who necessarily will be impacted and actually want to support their causes. They always try to side with the animals, for example, the general environmentalists actually want to have that the living side by side with nature. So space tourism poses an interesting opportunity in which it is currently gripping the news of not just US, but the rest of the world due to the PR campaign that portrays their success as the success of humanity, in which if you're able to reach the skies, for example, humanity's win. But this is because Elon Musk is hiding the fact that he paid zero tax dollars and that he tried to portray this as a self-funded success, for example, that everyone will benefit. But who is actually benefited here? Elon Musk and his big fat pocket. What we're trying to say is that we're trying to unmask all of these hidden gems and the way that he actually directly impacts environmentalists due to huge carbon emissions that was already proven by Ray. No, thank you. What changes? Likelihood that CO asked. 4 things. 1, environmentalists will gain virality because algorithm currently is tapped in to space travels. TikTok, space travels. All of that talks about that. So when we environmentalists directly opposes that, we're able to not only be picked up by the most biggest virality algorithm currently having in media, that we are going to have unprecedented level of awareness in individuals' levels. Second, news media will also cover this because they know debates generates highest ratings, especially when it's directly oppositional towards things that people are generally interested in. It would generate the highest rating possible, ensuring there is incentive structure inside the media company to talk about this even more. Thirdly, in political level, even better, because Republicans and Democrats are currently, their strategy is to portray the image of being the everyday people's party, to talk to the underbelly of America's unlistened, untapped into middle class, for example, that lies in the Rust Belt, for example. These people, when we talk to them like how Ray portrayed, in which that, hey, space travel expensive. You could have used this money, for example, for the betterment of the natural resources around you so that you don't have to live in scarcity anymore. You could have used this, for example, to prevent the flooding that generally harms you due to the lack of funds, for example, to stop these kinds of flooding from happening, due to the lack of brain power for utilized in mapping, for example, the ways of the storm moves. What we're trying to say here is that we're trying to say that we're sympathizing with people on the ground, and we say that these people are not, because they are directly spending money, for example, for things you don't even need. So the impact, how will this better our movement? Link back. One, what we are building of a strategy of two folds. One, galvanizing the public to push for change in the parliament. How does this happen? In awareness level, people in the gray area will be interested because it's the only way to destroy the false perception of space tourism has portrayed that it is somehow seen as good. Especially important, yeah, when the unprecedented huge floodings that happen is currently impacting them at this very moment. So when we act, for example, they're already watching TV as their feet is submerged underwater. They can see that, oh, damn. So they're the reason why I'm actually doing this. What we're trying to say is that people are currently harmed, and neighborhoods that are in New York and Pantai Indah Kapuk are harmed, not just in the poor edges of Africa, directly impacted, livelihood lost due to unprecedented floodings. We're able to say that, hey, there is an enemy that you can actually tap into, a concrete crystallized enemy that they can fuel their anger to, which increases our likelihood by tenfold at the end of the day for them to be sympathetic to our cause because they know that we are the ones who are fighting for them. Second, how does this change the culture? Because parliaments want to listen to them most likely because they want to garner votes in 2024 election. Second, this is building culture of shame to workers inside Tesla. This is especially powerful, right? Because Elon Musk is a shitty anti-union boss in which the work is all sucks anyway, pays are already comparatively less than what others are having. They only go there because if we break this perception, what happens is that they're able to finally leave the company. This mitigates the impact of environmental harm that Ray already talked about. But most importantly, they're able then to sympathize with our cause because we show them that this cause actually is better because it allows individuals to be mitigated from the existing harm that happens. But lastly, principle level, even if we're not effective, it's still good because the burden of this debate is to prove to you that this is something that we would want to do. Within that, it's still good when environmentalists are fighting for the cause in which we're trying to protect environments, for example, from being directly misused and taken away by the resources that are unjustly allocated to only suffice those who are very much in power. Effective allocation of resources has and will always be environmentalists' main goal. At the end of the day, if you are allocating so much money that could have saved the world from, saving down trees from burning, for example, or saving fishermen from dying, the attempt of it initially is always good, especially when the degree of harm that space tourism has is as big as it is. The attempt is already justified, even if OO proves that it is not successful. So at the end of the day, at least on our end, we prove to you why it will work, why it's urgent, but most importantly, why it's principally correct, even if it doesn't work.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now I call upon the Deputy Leader of Op. Time is yours.
Okay. No specific pronouns. Yeah, why is it so dark? Yeah, whatever. POI through chat box. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. What OO want here is simple because I think so far OO is the one that portray the interest of the environmentalists to the fullest. Because of what? First, we show you that the interest of the environmentalists is sure at the very best to achieve the possibility that OG state, for example. But then in the sense of us, it's a more sustainable energy. We don't want to be seen as anti-establishment, for example, because it's easier for the media that you glorify so much to later on reportray us as the villain of anti-establishment, for example. Those all attentions will not gain sympathy. Bad attention is not good. And if you are advocacy, for example. But then second, what we couldn't lose is our grounded, important, long progress of things, forest, exactly the orang-utan that they portray, but also not mentioning the hutan adat that also being captured because it's very nature and people-based as being portrayed by PM. This is very important. We couldn't lose it. Our stance is quite simple. We're pretty much Tony Stark in Endgame. Sure, gaining what we lost, hopefully preserving what we gain is a must. I think, my contribution in this speech gonna be two things. First is about better approach, and then second is all about sponsor, because the likelihood of manifestations of money, I believe if you are only talking about begging to the parliament, it's not gonna work at very best because it's temporary anyway. I'm gonna bite my worst case first, because rather on I probably will forget it, but before rebuttals, worst case first. in our very worst case, we will fail. And we wouldn't be able to switch into green energy and pursue them, for example. But it's still going to be okay, because at the very least, it didn't backlash long progress of our forest preservation, mitigation of forest fire, and connectivity with hutan adat that my LO already told you, for example. We think, as environmentalists, we still possess the interest of playing double agent politik dua kaki kind of strategy, for example, because it always has been environmentalist interest, strategy, and style. Because at least in the end of the day, when you offer these peoples with capital alternative, it's always going to result with more progressive, because you are offering them leeway, for example, to actually continue their establishment or development, but then make it way more sustainable, for example. This is exactly why those Coca-Cola examples is very important, because when you're trying to boycott Coke, for example, it's not going to work. But then whenever you try to make it way more environmental friendly, it works, because simply they possess the capitals. I already debunked all these things. But then several rebuttals. I think the main issue with OG case is simply, where's my OG case? I think the main issue is that, sure, they want attention, and the prerequisite of that attention to work is to have the sympathy to begin with. People will not sympathize, because simply people doesn't understand things about space tourism, even if you want to glorify it so much. But they do understand things about, let's say, ozone layers being penetrated, because simply there is not enough forest. All the flood that you say is simply because in Amazon, not Amazoning, for example. I think this is already creating more sympathy toward people, because this is grounded knowledge that they already know. In comparative, if you're going to talk about space, you're going to be seen as SJW that open into trends just for the sake of attention. And moreover, the attention that's going to be brought is not going to create sympathy anyway, because it's going to create backlash. But then, within this idea of political discourse and hoping to politics, I think this is problematic, because first, this is only going to be temporary. Sure, they're going to listen to you until they get re-elected. After they get re-elected, boom, they're going to fund it all over again. Second, if you're going to somewhat believe that politician will just stand by there and saying that, oh, it's totally okay that you are challenging us, because in case you don't know, they are already funding Tesla, for example, giving loans and collaborating with NASA, and they're going to say that, oh, you are proving us wrong, and would you want us to believe that we were wrong? We are politician by nature. We are not going to take that. But if you're going to provide them with leeway, as the stance has been brought by my LO, they will most likely listen, because they're going to have the stance. At least our image is we are listening to our people, that, not proving us wrong, but proving that we could be better. I think that's already championed the idea from the opening government. That's why we are better comparatively to them, because the likelihood going to access way better on us. But then moving to our case, right? I think first is about our interest in itself, and then why then the idea of interest is very important. I think about forest preservation and forest mitigation, and then also carbon reduction through peatland and wetlands have been proven to be scientific, for example. This is also debunking the idea that PM brought to you, because, all the scientists going to be reallocated there. No, there is no ecological molecular scientist in Tesla, for example. There are nuclear engineering, though, for example. There are specific levels I don't understand what the idea would go in this particular thing. But then what is the manifestation? I think preserving would already people been trusted and grounded very to the level of indoctrination, that all people think that if your ozones are bolong-bolong simply because your forest not foresting, then people would accept that particular idea. I think within the idea of resistancy just for the sake of attention will not manifest into the idea that people will listen to you. Why? Because the idea of pure resistancy is gonna look like that oil example in F1, for example, where those anti-oil protesters are being run over. Why? Because they simply seen as annoying and not contributive, because they are protesting without giving solution. But then I think without doing that, we are giving an alternative and leeway for these particular people to actually do that. Not to mention, actively advocating is the fiat of the debate, which means you are going to neglect to certain extent your foresting campaign, for example, for the sake of opting into the virality that OG brought to the debate. I think this is problematic, because first, you are going to seen as inconsistent, but second, you are unable to prove your previous program to work, but then the current program is already opting. I think that is going to create exposure that you want, that environmentalist is failing in the end of the day, right? But then I think proving this alternative would also open into sponsor, because this is gonna be OO contribution. There is no team so far talking about where is the funding of this. This is my case. Where is the funding of this environmentalist, for example? I think it is coming from sponsor sponsors, right? In order for you to continue your long progress of program, you need to be accepted. You need to be to somewhat a certain extent playing those politics dua kaki, simply because you need funding to begin with, right? Simply why, let's say, okay, Greenpeace is not offending Ford to begin with, because the sum of funding of Ford in there to actually make Greenpeace program a reality. I think if you want to continuously progress with what you already been doing in the future, you still want to advocate for things, you should not opt in for this right now. Because if you are stating that this is space tourism is a very huge business, there is a potential of you opting into Tesla, telling them to use green energy so that they can also be your partner and sponsor and preserve your long program of forest, for example. I think this is a win-win solution, and this is why OO should win. Because first, we pinpoint what the problem in the status quo, what environmentalist interest we couldn't lose, but third of all, we provide leeway and likelihood why those people will listen. OO should champion over Uji.
All right, thank you for that speech. Oh, okay, MG is going to the toilet. So if anyone wants to go to the toilet, please do so now. And just let me know in the chat box or through audio that if you're back.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, so yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else goes to the bathroom? No? Okay. So, okay, you may start.
Oke. Duh, Madam Chair, emang boleh seglowing itu? Oke, let me set my timer dulu. Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. As CG, we want to make it clear that environmentalists is not against space exploration per se. We are only against space tourism. Environmentalism have always been cautiously conducting climate observation from the International Space Station and satellite usage. We have tried to control debris and upcoming threat in our orbit, and we have constantly seek extraterrestrial knowledge for innovative ways to save our environment. This motion strictly talks about tourism for entertainment, so forgive me if I am slightly knifing, right? OG's principle argument is a canon argument against any type of scientific advancement as long as there are still hungry people on the ground. That is not the motion. That's why I beg to propose this setup. So basically, OG wants the output of reducing demand for space tourism. That is an output, a dream, a wish, and not a likelihood. I will respond to Justin's POI better on why a weak, quote-unquote, social movement can achieve change. First of all, the burden of a social movement is not to ensure that change will certainly happen instantly in the near future. So CG needs to prove the likelihood that the opportunity of change will always exist by us making a clear, bold stance. Secondly, what is the parameter of weakness anyway? For a social movement, as long as our existence persists, our demand remains clear, and we are still used as a debate motion like now, that is strength. Have enough influence to create a narrative is the strength of a social movement. So we don't think that we are that weak. I will give you 2 exclusive urgencies. First, principally, environmentalists right now of all time need to conduct active advocacy against the biggest contributor of emission. Holding the most powerful entity accountable will ensure that we can continue to instill accountability on a more grassroots individual level as well. This is trickle-down influence concept. The second urgency, practically, how the people on the ground currently perceive environmentalists is important to be contextualized. This house would mention after all. There is currently a rise of sentiment against environmentalism. Our demand is either seen as super elitist, out of touch with reality, or environmental movement that we have done is seen as performative. So let's put those two, wait a minute, let's put these two urgencies in three different contexts. First, let's talk about grassroots level that is massive, right? OG said that people are desensitized because it's slow burn, there's no news. No. We think that the correct context is apathy and unawareness of urgency. Instead, there is a rising sentiments against environmentalists due to constant news about our failure to show a bold stance to actors that matters. Contextualization. Currently, there is this decreasing sentiment of our support because corporations and rich entities constantly evade environmental policies and contribute to emission. Carbon footprint treaty is a very menial in terms of percentage, and renewable energy is something that is still just a concept. Environmental treaties between countries are signed but not enforced, and agreements between nation blocs are not binding. This is why there's currently that race that we are losing credibility. The second, on an individual level, we think that individuals on the status quo have taken enough initiative. They open small green businesses. They buy more expensive green products. They resort to green living, like using sabun larak in Indonesia or reducing detergent usage. That is why, as environmentalists, we need to shift the focus of blame to recreational activities of the upper class as a way to also appreciate all the grassroots demography that has been listening to us and trying so hard to support the environmentalist movement. So thank you to young generation and home industries. OG parameter of virality is very uncertain because billionaires can afford both pay tax that can be reallocated to welfare and still enjoy space tourism. So we agree with OO. This debate is never about reallocation of resources and breaking establishment. It's about how environmentalists can work together with powerful entities and redirect their focus of space exploration on things that actually matter. Actual scientific exploration instead of recreational activity. Before I move to my third point, Justin.
So there's absolutely no incentive whatsoever for big corporations to just follow the demand of environmentalists when you say and you're actively trying to demonize them for what they do, right? Like presumably if you say that whatever that they're doing is wrong, then insofar as you cannot prove why they will absolutely listen to you and there's no certainty in that regard, you create no changes at all while you have already exhausted all of your already limited resources.
No. And this is exactly what my third point is to talk about, right? How are we actually not demonizing everything that corporation is doing? Please listen to me. I did say that exploration is okay for the sake of environment. The third part, we are going to lose credibility if we do not speak up now, because it will show that we are complicit to a really large environmental harm for the enjoyment of a few upper class, what OG was trying to propose. But the important thing is that we think that there's currently a wildly known alternatives. So we will not be seen as an annoying SJW, like OO said, and we will not be automatically labeled as demonizing corporation. What are the alternatives? First, on individual level, we literally have VR technology. This is not beyond tertiary, right? This is deliberately being selfish when you can already enjoy VR, you can already enjoy planetarium and a lot of facilities that allow you to experience the space for a tourist, in a tourism manner, right? It exists in a lot of public spaces and it's can be gathered freely, but it's also really privatized, so individuals can afford it. So no, Justin, corporations that want to sell the stuff can still do so. We support that part. But secondly, if you want to offer a more exclusive experience, for example, to appeal to potential billionaire investor, we think that NASA and Tesla can just allow these billionaires to try zero gravity chamber or space exploration simulation inside a replica ship or touring the actual rockets. What they want, this billionaire investor, is exclusivity and indulgence. And we think that these are alternatives to enjoy that already exist in the status quo. So they are simply deliberately being selfish. And that's the part that we do not like. There's already a lot of source of money that NASA and Tesla and everything can gain by providing exclusive experience. We don't think we need to add space tourism into that. So what is the likelihood that we will get social support then? How can we regain our credibility? Remember the recent event of Ocean Gate, where a few billionaires pass away due to submarine incident when they're trying to fuel Titanic, right? So the global population rejoice. They chant that eat the rich, and they even joke about the passing in a way that is really, really cruel against these billionaires. This is going to be the reaction if we allow space exploration and not advocates actively against it. Because space tourism rely on indulgence, despite the existence of less costly alternative. Only you can still tour Titanic using VR and using a lot of other simulation, but they choose the other alternative. So understanding that organic rejection will come to space tourism, we need to instead help the corporation and show them that stop it. People are going to hate you. We're also not on board with this, and it's going to scar our cooperation that we have been doing for so long. Side with the people, eat the ultra.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now I call upon the member of OP. Time is yours.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, you're audible.
Great. POI through chat. I'm gonna opening. Give me a couple seconds. Okay. Hi. It's been a really fun competition so far. Yeah, let's go. Okay. CO provides two substantive extensions. The first and the easier one to understand is to win top half by proving that the urgency that Gov proved gorgeously is exactly their own downfall. But secondly is the less intuitive but a more brilliant and coexistence space exploration. One thing before that though, that principle, or rather the goal of what you're trying to do is really unimportant to begin. And clear with three other things like sort of brought it to the debate. Well, they eventually will agree anyway. That I think like we share the exact same goal, at least in my opinion, way of debating, that we should fight against evil, and fight against evil is always a good thing. The question is, how do you actually want to do that? Change. Listen to what you have to say. There are 5 reasons why this is really unlikely, right? Like aside of the really obvious, like you have no power. One is the profit weighing, and I will activate opening opposition's harm, because the way corporations consider what they want to do is that they consider whether the profit that they can get outweighs the cost that they actually need to spend. That is to say, environmentalists are not the consumers of space tourism. Neither can environmentalists influence people who are the consumers of space tourism. This means that whether or not environmentalists boycott the proposal is irrelevant to SpaceX, because they will never be able to influence the profit margin in the end. You have literally no incentive for them to listen to you. Second, you are attacking the hobby of rich people. The obvious response is to say that it's just hobby. It's not important. Surely it's important, because hobby is the identity that people choose to subscribe, that people believe to give them happiness. That is to say, if you attack them by saying that what you're doing is essentially wrong, like necessarily, like people develop a new Titanic for God's sake, knowing that that might as well like kill a lot of people, but they still do that as a form of retaliation, as a form of like, fuck you, I don't really need your opinion because I can't have the money that I want to spend. But I want to know that it also backfires when Elgar talk about space tourism content in social media like TikTok, because that means that the universalization of the enjoyment of space tourism is not only enjoyed by rich people anymore, but also by a lot of people who find peaceful and soothing videos of Earth from above good, and peaceful for them from their TikTok window. This means that you're likely to be opposed by more people who enjoy this essentially, not only opposing the rich people. That is already like probably proven. 3, the mechanism primarily from Gov is using momentum through parliament. Like, look, the parliament in the US, like literally today, like later today, the government in the US is going through a shutdown. That means you have very slow policy making, uncoordinated effort. Both the Congress and the House of Representatives and the Senate are not going to be functional necessarily because you have a lot of political debates and stuff like this. You also have environmental agencies that are not going to be able to be working. We just literally just got an email from Penn talking about like, whether we will have a future here in America. So like a lot of governments are actually facing a lot of crisis, and that to that extent, like government issue, but exactly because of those crises, they're unable physically, even if they want to listen to you, they're unable to do just that because like, a lot of problems that they're facing. 4, I want to flip media sensation because like, even though it sounds intuitively true that media sensation is good, I would suggest that this is not a priori good, i.e. the media sensation being good is predicated on the empirical practice of such sensation. What you're likely going to be seen as is desperate. And it is very ironic that Grace said that we are going to be seen as out of touch. I don't think that there is any narrative that is more out of touch than complaining about a rocket flying away above the atmosphere of the Earth while you have a lot of other issues to be like discussed. So the question then becomes, who will capitalize and who will sensationalize, like capitalize and monetize all of this sensationalization of media? It's not likely to be left-wing media. Left-wing media will always report you anyway. This is likely to be the conservative or anti-climate deniers, like climate denier media, for example, who will use this story to say, look at these people, like they're very desperate, like it's very unclear what they want. But that is very generous, right? Because that assumes the best implementation of their mechanism. The clearest portrayal you get from Gov on what they really want to do is from Elgar to argue that you're going to expose Elon Musk tax evasion and that space tourism is expensive. I would note that it's already public information, right? That you learn ethics in the Wharton School in Penn because a lot of Penn alumni are caught for tax evasion. You already know that the price of space tourism is extremely high, but then nothing really changes. So it's unclear to me at this point, and it's unfortunate that GovWhip will never be able to bring it, what really changed in their side. Even if you want to question the priority, I want to know that even at GovBest, nothing really changes, but like focusing on exhausting everything of your global effort to chasing the win or capturing the win is unlikely to be as useful as focusing on separate agenda that is unique to different parts of the world. But secondly, just shortly on space exploration, it's the only way humanity or nature can survive, because in the end, humans and animals out of self-defense will continue to destroy the nature to begin with. I will smoothly engage to CG's distinction between space tourism and space exploration. They do coexist. 1, the profit from space tourism is the biggest funding source for space exploration, i.e. from SpaceX and International Space Station. CG said you can redirect funding to space exploration, which works against top half. But know the profit relation here. That also why it also has to be really expensive, because you get much more income than just planetarium and VR that does not generate that much of a revenue stream. And therefore, what is likely to happen is that with much more income, like all of your ideas about finding resources that you never can imagine, because the science of this Earth is finite and limited to your understanding of Earth alone. Finding new resources from the, extracting resources from asteroids, from Mars, developing renewable energy is something that you cannot see now, but you can develop, for example, because if the technology of space tourism increases, so will the technology for space exploration. You get much more ability, opportunity to get much more resources that you can never even imagine now. What essentially this shows is not only that space exploration is probably still to some extent able to generate some good, there's literally no delta in Gov. There's no reason for you to believe that you should affirm.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now I call upon the government whip. Oh, okay. Yeah, please take your time. Yang lainnya yang mau ke toilet, please do so now ya.
Check. I'm back. Am I audible?
Yeah, yes, you're audible.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wait a minute. Di docsnya jamming. All right. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so this is probably my last speech for this competition. So yeah, before that, a couple of thank yous for everyone. Yeah, it's been an honor, and I thank everyone in this room. Yeah, regardless the result, yeah, I had fun in this round, and yeah, hopefully the fun continues. Okay, so starting my POI through chat box or apa namanya raise hand feature. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Sabar. HP-nya kelap. Okay. 3, 2, 1. There will be 3 issues on comparing CG over CO. The second one, CG over OO. Last of all, CGs over OG. The first issue will talk about holistic and inclusive move for environmentalists. This is to prove why CGs over CO. Secondly, is on why CGs over OO regarding image and the support for the environmentalists. The last one, why CGs over OG, is on the regards of output, which is something that is heavily pushed in the opening debate, and let's just engage to that level. All right, now let's talk about the first one regarding YCGs over CO. First of all, for far too long, environmentalists have advocated a lot towards individuals or corporations in the developing countries or even developed countries because they are assumed as the biggest contributor for the environmental harm and degradation. The problem is that Grace told you earlier, space tourism also generates a lot of carbon emission, right? By not advocating against it, as environmentalists, you're going to play favoritism for the upper class and the space NASA people, which generates public outrage, right? Which is the group of individuals and even corporations, especially when they have done their part. For example, they have done their part by complying to the green production, which is costly, or environmentally friendly lifestyle, or even getting financial sanction and or punishment by the government due to the environmental law pushed by the environmentalists. The harm of this favoritism, Grace told you earlier, will translate into a retaliation in the form of non-compliance, right? Why is this non-compliance dangerous? Because principally, this non-compliance will only hurt the credibility of the environmentalists at stake. Their sustainability is also at stake. What is the harm when they don't have credibility and sustainability? The future environmentally friendly advocacy won't occur, right? Which only weakens the future preventive mechanism to the environmental harm. And that's when our environment will be in danger over and over again. That is exactly why we are much more realistic in CG. Just stay consistent, just advocate against this space tourism. And when we are staying consistent, we can gain the compliance, we can gain the support and also the understanding of the people. And that's when staying consistent is important. But let's see what CO told you here. CO told you that this is going to be discriminative towards the rich people's hobby or the upper class hobby because this is related to their identity. Grace literally told you on the alternative. We told you that we have VR technology and planetarium. It's also highly privatized, so individuals can avoid it. If you don't believe me, you can go to the science centers or even mall in urban areas that have VR glasses like this with space scenes in it. All you have to do is wear the VR glasses and enjoy every single thing like meteors, planets, orbits, a sky full of stars, even like Coldplay song. So if Justin wants the identity and the hobby preservation for indulgence, you can do this. There is no proof why VR and planetariums are not enough. Or zero gravity chamber or space exploration simulation inside a replica ship. You can literally enjoy that. And this is enough. Unfortunately, CO has never proven to us why it has to go to the extent of rocket launch and every single thing. So let's see what COs respond to this one. They say that this hobby is the biggest source of income. This is just a claim, not a fact. Corporations have the controls on what they want to sell and what they want to market, right? Any other branch can be the biggest one if they want to focus on marketing it. Sensationalization in CG is different than OG, so they cannot accuse us for being derivative on this one. We characterize what demographic we are pandering to. For example, individuals who made effort to conserve environment or at least agree that environment needs to be preserved. So obviously, climate change deniers sensationalizing our narrative does not matter. So under our world, it's much simpler rather than the parliament change that wants to be advocated by OG, but it's much more realistic, and we prove you the process in reaching that kind of output. So therefore, CGs over CO in that matter. Now let's talk about why CGs over OO. Regarding image and the support for environmentalists, two things that OO told you. First, LO, we will be demonized as annoying as JWs. Two response and one weighing. Number one, environmental harm is also annoying, bestie, especially when the reason behind that is for recreational purpose, which is not even tangible for environment, right? As environmentalists, why should we protect this interest? Thus, when you don't advocate against space tourism, you will be considered ignorant or complicit towards the continuity of that space tourism that generates environmental. Knowing that the harm is symmetrical, at least in CG, by active advocacy against the space tourism, yes, we are considered as annoying, but sometimes what's right for us might be annoying. We're talking on the perspective of environmentalists. We can debunk the demonization by showing consistency through active advocacy against the space tourism. How? When you're consistent in holistically fighting against the contributors of environmental harm, you gain the trust and the support of the audiences. The weighing is simple. Knowing that the harm is symmetrical in both sides, at least we gave you the mitigation by staying consistent. Under OO, they did not provide any mitigation under the harm of demonization on their side. Thus, under the mitigation of symmetrical harm, CGs over OO. Secondly, DO told you this is going to create resistance for attention by advocating sexy issue. Two responses and one weighing as well. Okay, in the worst case, we seek attention. That's exactly what we need. Because for far too long, our advocacy can only run when there is attention that is manifested into participation or support, right? Which are very crucial. In the advocacy, there will be productive discourse to why space tourism is generally not a tangible need or the environmental harm is not worth the benefit. That's when audience realize that environmentalists is really serious in advocating against any forms of activities. There is a environment is a time-sensitive issue. That's why it's extremely crucial to gain attention and have a follow-up action and gaining the compliance for the society in the grassroots level. Guess what? That can only happen when you stay consistent. That's why CG identity stands. Second response, if they insist on having no attention seek at all, okay, then prove to us why without seeking attention, there is a likelihood of audience listening to you. So the missing likelihood here, for far too long, we are losing appeal and points of attraction. This is just the same with other social movement with minimum engagement, e.g. feminist, pride movement, and many more. So the weighing is simple. Engagement to worst case scenario happens in CG. We illustrate the benefit that outweighs the harm. Even further, the degree of harm on attention seek is not even illustrated in OO. So judge, take notes on that one. That's why benefit outweighs the harm, and the harm is not even tangible in OO. Lastly, why CGs over OG? On output, CG is much more realistic. We told you that by staying consistent, people will see us as a credible organization, right? And that's when compliance occurs, and that's when further preemptive mechanism or any green practices can be complied by the people. OG wants to champion the idea of asking and advocating change in parliamentary level. Justin questioned this due to the powerless state of environmentalists, right? That's why the feasibility on OG is questionable. We engage to Justin's question by saying that exactly when we are powerless, we need numbers, supports, and participation, and that can only happen when you are consistent and not being complicit and not actively advocating against space tourism. That's why stop space tourism.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now I call upon the opposition whip. Time is yours.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay, very nice. I'm going to, give me a moment to set up my timer. If you want to POI, please interrupt me verbally. I don't think I will have the time, but you can attempt it. Yeah, pronounce he, him. I don't think there's anything triggering. There shouldn't be. Okay, beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. The Earth is literally on a limited time, and the only way that we can save ourselves is to invest in space exploration and make sure that we have access to the resources provided to us by this avenue. We say that the side that can win this debate is the side that can make sure that space exploration proceeds unimpeded, and that's going to be closing opposition. So 2 things broadly in this speech. First, I'm going to talk about the benefits of space exploration and why we are the side that best facilitates that. Second, I'm going to engage to government bench on the effectiveness of the movement in general and why that's going to be something that we can achieve in our second house. So firstly, on space exploration, right? We agree with government bench in one regard. We agree that humanity is headed on an unstoppable collision course against Mother Nature. We are staring the threat of extinction in the face, completely beholden to the comforts provided to us by fossil fuels and dirty energy, unable to make that switch to energy salvation. We are all too aware of the flashing signs that we are headed to environmental dystopia, but we are unable to course correct. We are unable to convince our politicians to switch to solar power, for example. For example, and so even though we know that Earth is doomed, there's nothing that we can do about that. We say that under such extreme circumstances, we need to prioritize at all costs any avenue that is available to us to mitigate or potentially even solve the looming climate crisis. This is why Justin's content is important, because we're talking about things like constructing resource outposts in extraterrestrial bodies so that we can appropriate those natural resources for Earth. These are things like terraforming Mars, so that when Earth inevitably burns down, we have the technology required to transform that inhospitable environment into domains where humans can live and breathe, just how we have lived and breathed in Mars, for example. So we need to stress, right, that this is not a pie in the sky goal. No, thank you. This is not a pie in the sky goal. We have made very real strides towards this. We have proven the existence of a water source on Mars. We have constructed plans for a colony which can self-sustain. We have figured out a way to terraform the atmosphere and make sure that humanity can carry on even under this extreme environmental duress. SpaceX has already made plans and offering tickets for people to become space pioneers as inhabitants of the very first Martian frontier. And the science behind that is backed by bodies of high repute and expertise. These are bodies like NASA, by astrophysicists who regularly publish papers on the topic, for example, right? So Justin provided to you a vast amount of reasons as to why space exploration and space tourism comes hand in hand. These are things like how space tourism is a very profitable revenue source, and the tech that is utilized in both industries are very similar, so the progress on each side is translatable to the other, right? We further posit to you that space exploration in isolation is extremely difficult thing to justify as a form of investment, because it is an extremely costly venture, right? You have to pay literally the best scientists and engineers in the world, the graduates of Ivy Leagues and like STIA, for example, who have so many other options available to them. You need to make sure that the money that you are offering is worthwhile. For example, you have to have many trials and errors of exploding rockets, for example. You have to use the most costly materials available, and you risk fatal risks like the Challenger spaceship literally exploding in midair and costing the lives of 9 astronauts. This requires a huge amount of investment. It is not at all solvable by avenues like planetariums and fun little Disney World simulations provisioned to you by CG. It can only be motivated by investment by the top 0.0001% for whom the immediate reward that can motivate them is space tourism, right? They further claim that we can just gain funding in other ways. We disagree, because space exploration can only show its profits many years in the future. There are structural barriers to it being prioritized as a result, both in the private and public sectors. In the private sector, it is difficult to justify this to your investors, because the results of your research and the results of your investment that is very costly may only appear 30 to 40 years in the future when your investors are already dead. In the public sector, it is even worse, because politicians have very short incentive structures of being re-elected. So if it doesn't generate profit in the next 5 years, it's as good as dead of an idea, right? What this all combines to mean is that we are the only site that facilitates the eventual environmental salvation, because we ensure that space tourism can carry on and therefore arm ourselves with the single silver bullet that can pierce through the most urgent environmental concern that we currently have as an environmental movement. This is within our interest, and therefore we must champion it, right? But secondly, I'm also going to engage the government bench regarding how we are more persuasive to the environmental movement. No, what did they tell you? OG told you that algorithm is already talking about this issue of space tourism in a very positive light, and we need to tap into that discourse. The problem of criticizing this, as Gulf would have you do, is that a lot of these claims that are claiming space tourism as the future of humanity is actually founded in the truth. It is a truth that space exploration is one of the most possible avenues we can employ in order to provide salvation to mankind. But even if you agree that people can be convinced that space tourism generates absolutely no benefit, why do we still win? Because Justin already told you that why there is contextual evidence for why individuals on the ground does not respond to the factual knowledge of environmental harm, right? So these are things like, for example, Taylor Swift literally being connected to the single biggest carbon emission via jet fuel, and that is smoothed over by a single statement by her publicist. And then she went on to have the most successful music tour of the decade. So opposing government's claim is that people are motivated and galvanized by rich people escaping the hammer of the law. They want to see these people's downfall. They need to discuss why people on the ground are so willing to absolve Taylor Swift of her environmental crimes just because she happened to write a couple of relatable songs, right? We will provide you the counterfactual. People do not respond to this because of two reasons. First, the environmental effect is something that feels very far off in the future. They do not feel like it's something that is so urgent, or at any rate less or more urgent than the heartbreak that they're experiencing and that Taylor Swift is facilitating them to heal, for example. But secondly, there's also a lot of doomsday-based apathy that people feel regarding the overwhelming and looming threat of climate change. We're all going to die anyway, so why even try, right? But we further say that individuals who are at all interested in the environmental movement do so with the sole goal of wanting a good resource allocation for the resources that the movement has been endowed with. To that regard, they will be immensely critical of the environmental movement's resource allocation. We say that making opposing space tourism a priority only serves to turn them away because that fails to be an important consideration no matter which parameter you consider. What are those parameters? Two things. First parameter is scale. This is in direct contention with opposing government who told you that we need to criticize the biggest contributor of emission. We agree, and this is why we need to deprioritize criticizing space tourism, right? Because space tourism is a vastly exclusive industry that is only participated in by less than 100 people every year. There are, say, 5 space flights that are happening each year at the maximum. We think that compared to jet fuel, to coal plants, it generates a negligible amount of environmental harm simply because it is so exclusive and so inaccessible to the vast majority of the population, right? The second parameter is likelihood of actually manifesting change. The one who holds the purse strings of space tourism are people who are extremely powerful, and we say that we have not seen any signs of a successful revolution against the rich, for example, because ultimately people know it's an impossible fight to pick. Comparatively, when we pursue things like cleaning beaches, like pressuring policymakers to shift to clean energy and things like that, this is something that's within the power of the average person. And rather than dismantling SpaceX, that is the more strategic fight that we can pick. And for that reason, vote for closing opposition.
So everyone, you can leave the room so the judges could discuss.
Thank you.